Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to my PowerPoint presentation. My name is Gutama, and today I'll be covering Black youth suicide rate, a disturbing trend. Before I start, I'd like to do a land and ancestral acknowledgement. I would like to start by honoring the land that we are on, which has been the site of human activity since time immemorial. It is the traditional territories of the Huron-Wendat, Anishinaabe, and the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and more recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River First Nations. Ontario is covered by 46 treaties and other agreements, and is home to many Indigenous nations from across Turtle Island, including the Inuit and the Métis. These treaties and other agreements agree to peacefully share and care for the land and its resources. Other Indigenous nations, Europeans, and newcomers were invited into this covenant in the spirit of respect, peace, and friendship. We're all treaty people. Many of us have come here as settlers, immigrants, newcomers in this generation or generations past. We are mindful of broken covenants, and we strive to make this right with this land and with each other. I would also like to acknowledge those of us who came here forcibly and involuntarily, particularly as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. And so I honor and pay tribute to the ancestors of African origin descent. Before I start my presentation, I just want to go over this glaring statistics. Indigenous people are at a greater risk of suicide. Inuits are 6.5 times higher. First Nation people are 3.7 times higher, and Métis are 2.7 times higher than non-Indigenous people to commit suicide. The reasoning is due to inequities experienced by First Nations, Inuit, and Métis politicians, which are anchored around racist colonial policies and practices that began with residential schools, loss of cultural continuity, territories, and languages. Also unaddressed intergenerational trauma adds to the ongoing challenges faced by Indigenous people. So in this presentation, you'll learn about the suicide rate in Canada, Black youth suicide, signs and symptoms of suicidal behavior. Suicide in Canada. In Canada, suicide is the leading cause of death among youth and young adults aged 15 to 34. We know that suicide is a complicated phenomenon. We need to start by asking what are the risks and protective factors of suicide behavior are. Factors associated with suicide. Trauma is my first image. Research has shown that any form of trauma will change your brain chemistry. My second image is exposure to conflict or violence. Experience over a prolonged period of time will create physical and mental health symptoms. A youth may be exposed to violence during a family crisis, such as verbal, physical, and domestic abuse, or child-parent conflict, or peer-to-peer conflict. My next image is due to the impact of racism. So we're against racism. Racial trauma affects most Black people either directly or indirectly. Therefore, race needs to be included in mental health discussions. Impacts of daily experiences of racism also include depression, anxiety, addiction, and post-traumatic stress. But racism is often not discussed in mainstream health circles. My next image is alcohol and substance abuse. The sad truth is that although many with suicidal thoughts resort to drugs and alcohol to escape from the emotional pain, unfortunately, these substances end up being the gateway in them committing suicide. Other risk factors include poverty, inequality, depression, anxiety, ADHD, gender issues, sexual identities, substance abuse by parents and parents' psychology effects, and sexual abuse as well. According to Statistics Canada, this graph shows the suicide rates of individuals aged 10 to 19 and 20 to 29 from the years 2000 to 2018 by sex. As you can see from this graph, the rate of death by suicide for female has been increasing slightly when we are looking at the blue and green lines. So for example, if you look at the blue line, which represents female regressions between the age of 10 to 19, In 2000, we can say it was roughly 3.5, and it grew to 2018, where it's about 4.8 per death per 100,000 population. And for the green bar right there, which represents females aged 20 to 29, we can say it was at 4.9 in 2000, and it increased to, we can say about 6 point something in 2018. However, when we look at the orange and yellow lines, we can see that both male youth between 10 to 19 and males between the age 20 to 29 are committing suicide at an alarming rate. Youth boys are more than double times more likely to commit suicide, because if we look at the orange line, they're about, in 2000, they're about, we can say around 8 per 100,000, and it's decreased to about 6.5 something in 2018. Whereas in 2000, for adults between the age of 20 to 29, it was roughly around 21 or 20.5, and then it drastically went down a little bit to about 17 per 100,000. So we can see that adult males are more than 3 times more likely to commit suicide than adult females. We can conclude that although completed suicides are more prevalent among male youths and adult male, suicide ideation and suicide attempts are more common among females in their age groups. Black youth suicide rate. In order to stop it, we need to advise a plan to provide healing for both the youth and their family. The idea is to get to the root of the trauma by providing appropriate counseling therapy from a clinical psychologist or a mental health professional or psychiatrist. But unfortunately, we know that there are barriers to seeking mental health care. Some example of these barriers include shame. To me, shame is self-doubting who you are and viewing everything from a negative mindset. You may tell yourself that you're not worthy, or you may experience further embarrassment from society when you share your true feelings. Most research suggests that people from all cultures, environments, and geographic regions experience shame. Stigma is another barrier. The stigma surrounding mental health prevents some people from seeking mental health support. There's a perceived taboo due to a misunderstanding in the Black community on what mental illness means. Then there's also the barrier of financial costs or the lack of Black therapists, and also systemic racism that one has to overcome. Black youth suicide rate. So based on the Kids Help Phone data, they found that Black youth are experiencing a variety of mental health problems in Canada. Black youth are 47% less likely to seek mental health support compared to white youth. On the positive note, by the end of 2021, the Kids Help Phone will be launching a dedicated e-mental health program for young Black Canadians. I just want to take this time, if a person that listened to this presentation is a young person that needs someone to talk to explain their personal experiences or challenges that they're currently feeling, or may have suicidal thoughts, the Kids Help Phone line is a great place to call. So feel free to call them at 1-800-668-6868 or text them at 686868, and someone will respond immediately. Canadian youth suicide rate research. In Canada, there's limited research when studying suicide among Black youth. There's large literature linking suicidal behaviors to the use and abuse of illicit drugs in adolescence. Among most adolescents, however, depression and related risk factors may be better predictors of suicidal behaviors. A new report by Child First Canada states that several children's hospitals have reported spikes in admission for suicide attempts since the COVID pandemic started in 2020. According to Statistics Canada, 64% of youth aged 15 to 24 reported a decrease in their mental health starting after the COVID pandemic of last year. Signs of suicide. So this could be whether it's a suicide threat, if a person has a suicide plan or method or access, making final arrangements, sudden changes in physical habits and appearances, preoccupation with death and suicide themes, increased inability to concentrate or think clearly, loss of interest in previously pleasurable activity, systems of depression, increased use and abuse of alcohol and other drugs, hopelessness, rage, anger, or seeking revenge. Other signs include reckless behavior activities, feeling trapped, anxiety and agitation, sleep difficulties, especially insomnia, dramatic changes in mood, sudden or recent purchase of a weapon, no reason for living, no sense of purpose in life. And I highlighted these 3 points as well: sense of being a burden, profound sense of loneliness, alienation, isolation, sense of fearlessness. These are crucial signs that one needs to look out to when observing if a person is at risk of committing suicide. Steps to suicide intervention. As part of my training and other training, we've learned about ACE. A stands for ask, C stands for care, and E stands for evaluate. So step 1, you gotta ask the question about suicide. Step 2 is you have to show that you care. Step 3, you have to evaluate the situation. So once again, if the person that you're trying to support shows any of the signs mentioned in the previous 2 slides, then you should not be afraid to have an open discussion about suicide. This means asking the question about suicide. So the do's when you're asking the question about suicide: be straight to the point and ask if the person is thinking about committing suicide. Again, make sure to directly use the word suicide in your conversation with this person. If they answer no, try to be a little bit more persistent and ask questions differently. If they answer yes, be supportive and thank them for sharing how they feel in that moment with you. The don'ts: don't discuss your feelings on suicide, don't talk about worst case scenarios, and don't lecture them. The C: show that you care. The do's here is talk less and just listen to the other person. Show them that you care by telling them that you don't want them to die. Also, explain that you will provide them the support that they need. The don'ts here is don't judge or minimize anything that they say. Finally, the E is evaluate the situation. This means that you have to do is provide hope to this person, share resources that will further allow them to explore their feelings with a mental health professional, and if they're in a crisis, immediately call emergency services. It is always a good idea to follow up with this person if it's feasible. The don't is don't leave them alone after the initial conversation. This comes to the end of my presentation. So I just want to say thank you for taking the time to listen to this presentation, and I wish you have a great day. Take care. Bye.